everybody, welcome back to Unlimited Commander. I'm Adam, and as joined as always by my lovely co-host Matt. Matt, how's it going?
It's going pretty good, I've been getting a charity stream done the last week or so. Started playing Breath of the Wild. So I've been doing a lot of preparation for that. I decided to go ahead and farm some rupees off screen because I realized that the game requires you to basically farm about 100,000 rupees through the course of the game.
Just raise a fortune.
Yeah, so I was like, people don't have to watch me just like climbing the random sides of cliffs and cracking open things. So I decided to go ahead and do a little bit off that.
I feel the same way with certain games like that. I struggle with like the games where you just like meander about collecting random junk, and that's like it doesn't make for great content. I find. Like, it's not bad if you're engaged with your audience and stuff like that, but, like, I also struggle with it. There's ones that I'm just like, I don't feel like farming.
Well, like, that first day, I felt pretty good about the stream. I think it went well, but there was definitely at one point where it was just like, I needed a fish for a recipe, and I was like, okay, I'm going to kind of focus in and see if I can find this fish. And then I came back to life in my head, and 15 minutes had passed, and I hadn't found anything. Not only did I not find a fish, I didn't find anything in that moment. I was just kind of swimming around in circles doing nothing, and I was like, yeah, I can't do that anymore.
Fishing is always my most hated mechanic in any game, no matter how good they do the fishing game. I hate it. I hate it so much.
Yeah. The trick is if you can find a body of water with fish in it, you throw a bomb in there, and the fish will blow up and float to the top. It is the most sadistic thing I've ever seen in a video game.
And yet, semi-realistic.
Yeah. Blowing a fish with M80s is a thing where I was from. I didn't do it, but I know people who did.
Good golly.
Oh, man. What about you? How are things going?
Oh, medium? We're going to say medium today. Somehow, over the course of 2 weeks, you managed to like pack up and mail me your cold.
Yeah, sorry about that.
You didn't put the return address on, so I couldn't send it back without opening it. I am starting to come down with something. Hopefully, it doesn't stick around too long because by the time this airs, I will have done a streamathon on my personal Twitch stream, and with any luck, that went well, and I wasn't sick. So when this airs, leave a comment below asking how it went and if I was sick. And if I was sick, was it ever a weird time?
Also, when you're in the comments, make sure to say happy anniversary to Adam. It has been 1 year streaming as of day of recording.
Hi day.
It's pretty awesome. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's been quite a trip.
Not everybody makes it a full year, so like you've made this habitual enough that like it shouldn't be a problem. You can just keep going.
I hope so. It's nowhere, and much the same as like this podcast taking off will require the same thing, and I will be appreciative of it then. But I'm nowhere without like the support of the communities that have been coming in and supporting me and hanging out in the streams and stuff like that, and in general, just the cool friends that I've made, like yourself.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
It has been fun.
It has been fun.
I think I was there for that first one.
The very first one? Possibly.
I think so. Metroid Dread. Yeah, I think I came in on that very first one, which was very cool. It was very neat to...
Actually, yeah, because I was already playing on Paragon before I started streaming myself. I think that's what it was, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a year, Matt.
Yeah.
It's been a year.
We were talking about fun things, though, so let us talk about fun things, like you tried to segue into.
I tried to segue, but we're too busy, complimenting each other.
My fault.
How dare you?
How dare I
take those compliments back?
Vibes. Never. Anyway.
Never. Planechase Commander is our chosen subject of the day. A little bit of a deviation from what we normally talk about in regards with like creating like a limited environment to play in. This is still a constructed environment, but it's a wacky alternate way to play. What do you know about it? I know very little.
Planechase is actually one of my favorite things. So a bit of background on this. When I first came back to Magic, or first started really playing Magic, I was playing a lot of competitive Magic, and this was like Cons Theros area, like, a while ago. 14, I think, that area. And to balance out my play life a little bit, I started picking up a lot of the ancillary products. So when Theros was out, I had the Hydra deck and the Minotaur deck and the Reveler deck. I bought that Face Off against Garruk the Planeswalker thing. Just like anytime I could pick up some sort of ancillary thing, I was there for it. Archenemy, huge, big fun. Because it allowed me to play with friends who normally won't play with me because I was playing really heavy competitive Magic, so they didn't want to play like sweaty 60 card stuff. So when the first Planechase decks came out, I picked those up right away, and we played those. I had 3 friends. 2 of us were living together. The other 2 were living together nearby, so they just come over and we just jam and just have fun, or play with us and our spouses. And I thought Planechase was super fun. It gave me an outlet for a lot of the creative stuff I wanted to do while I was grinding out tournament stuff on the other end. I had to step away from that, though, and then when I came back directly into Commander, which is already a creative outlet space for me. So I'd kind of let Planechase fall to the side and other ancillary products. And then I found out that we could just Commanderize Planechase. And so we played Planechase Commander on one of the Praetors for Charity events. And I want to talk a little bit about like the things that are good and things that are bad about Commanderizing. But essentially, I think that Planechase is really built more for a Commander situation than it's built for anything else. So I wanted to be able to talk about what we can do to like play Commander Planechase and kind of how it ties into what we do talk about, like how it ties into the limited format as far as things go.
And it should be noted as well that like this is not an unsupported idea anymore. When we received the starting announcements for March of the Machines products, the precons for March of the Machines all actually include 16 planes, including some new ones, but reprints of a lot of the old favorites. So this is going to come up in the playing done for Praetors for Charity. Huge shout out to them. Another event coming up in May. Keep your eyes peeled for that. I'm going to post some stuff about where to find them. Also, a good friend of ours, Emmara, Goddess of Blunder on Twitch. Again, I will put something up because we like them also. She predominantly plays Planechase on her stream. So you do still find this. It's not like some random thing we dug out of the basement and went, oh yeah, these are real and exist and we can play these. Like this is ongoing right now where you can, pick them up and play yourself, coming up soon in a brand new sealed product, or lots of other fun ways to find it online, either like the entire collection. I know there's a couple of apps, like I think I have one on my phone where you can just like Planechase your way through the entire Planechase deck to like customize it the way you want, which we'll get into why you might want to do that. And so we're hoping to give this to you so that you can take it now, go forward, and enjoy another fun way to play Commander.
But while we're on the subject, let's first talk about what Planechase is. Like, I know that we just talked about how much I love it. I should probably tell you what it actually does. So Planechase, as a variant of Magic, is it's a constructed form, which means you build your own decks, and it utilizes an extra deck of ultra wide cards that we call planes. Each plane is a place in the Magic the Gathering universe that you can travel to. So when you start, you have a particular number of planes sitting in front of you in a stack. You shuffle them and you flip the top one. You are now on that location, and you do whatever that location does for every player. Sometimes it has something on it like everything with +1/+1 counters has trample. and then it'll have another little note on it. Or maybe the plane says something about at the beginning of each upkeep, sacrifice a creature if you can't discard a card. Just these wild things that are global effects for every single player. You're also given a little planar die, and had I thought about it, I would have brought my planar die out so I could show people what it looks like.
That's okay. I will find a high res photo of it and put it on the screen.
But essentially, it is a 6-sided die, except only 2 sides have something on it. On one side, there's the Planeswalker symbol, that 5-prong thing. That is your note to Planeswalk. So if you roll the die and you hit that, you have to flip the next plane over and do a Planeswalk. And now you're in a new place with new rules. The other side of it has this big swirly symbol, and that is called Chaos. And when chaos ensues, is the way they're wording the mechanic now, you do the other thing that's on the planes card under the chaos symbol. So sometimes, like with the +1/+1 counter example I gave earlier, a chaos thing on it might say double the number of +1/+1 counters on a thing, or put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, or something like that. Just to make it so that they tie together with the thing, but have some sort of flavor thing that may be super good or may be super bad for you. Hence why it's chaos. One of the planar products was called Planar Chaos. So it's about chaos, and it really does do a lot to fill out the game and make it more interesting.
One thing to just like give this a little bit of texture and context is that we don't talk about it anymore because the game is just so huge and old. But the story behind Magic as a game is that we are each our own planeswalker, traversing the planes of the multiverse and summoning the creatures that we have encountered and pulling the mana required from them from the land on which we stand and our connections to that land, which is why we tap land for mana and why our deck is filled with creatures and spells and stuff, as this is like the culmination of our travels as a planeswalker. So Planechase, the story behind that is that you are in fact 2 battling planeswalkers, or any number I guess now, chasing each other through the multiverse and trying to find the plane that best suits your own combat style as a planeswalker. So, and I picked one willy-nilly just so that I can have something to reference. So you've explained there's 2 major things on a plane. I have found Llanowar, something that we all know and love. Llanowar being a location on the plane of Dominaria. And it says, statically, all creatures have tap, add green to your mana pool. So when you are on Dominaria, in the area of Llanowar, all creatures tap for green mana, which is a very Llanowar thing to do. And then when you roll Chaos, untap all creatures you control. So an effect that happens when you roll the chaos side, and something that just happens for everybody. This is the basis of every single plane that you'll find in a planar deck.
Perfect. So how do you change where you're at? How do you get to roll this die? Well, the rules on that are, on your turn, at sorcery speed, you can roll the die once for free. If it hits something, great. If it doesn't hit something, nothing happens. You may choose to roll an additional time. For each time, you have to pay more mana to do it. So on the second roll, it's 1. On the third roll, it's 2. On the fourth roll, it's 3, etc., etc., etc.
It follows the same scale as Commander tax, actually. If you think about it like that, and in putting it into a context that our audience might be able to relate to, is that you pay 1 mana for each time you've rolled the die this turn.
Yes, so it's 1 mana instead of 2, right?
Yeah. So much the same as like Command Tax, where you pay 2 for each time you've cast it already this game. The same thing per turn for rolling the die.
Exactly. So just remember that you can end up pushing your luck as much as you want, as much mana as you have. You can push your luck that many times, but it will always it affects you to try to mechanically work in when it's advantageous or not advantageous for you to keep trying to planeswalk. Because, if you spend all your mana trying to walk and you don't get to play anything, you're down a turn. So you have to kind of juggle that as part of the...
What is the most mana you've ever paid to roll the planar die?
14. Which is too much.
So that's a logarithmic equation I'm not going to do. But how did you have that much mana? That is hundreds of mana.
So I was playing a game of Planechase where I had an infinite mana combo on the field. I can't remember exactly which one it is. I want to say it was one of the Isochron Scepter loops or something like that.
Sure, yeah.
But I was playing with a group of friends of mine, and I had gotten an infinite combo out. But the plan that we were on, I couldn't do it. I couldn't win on this plane. So I kept flipping, trying to go, and we actually planeswalked on like 4 or 5. But that plane wasn't good for me either. So I just kept going and going. And then I eventually ended up on a plane where I was like, okay, here I should be able to end this game. Because originally, even with infinite mana, I couldn't end the game. But we ended up on a plane where I was like, okay, now I can do my thing. And I went ahead and did it and got out. And everyone's like, well, thank God for that.
Yeah, right. Good for you, bud.
Yeah. Way to go, buddy.
Yeah.
There's also one other type of card that came out later for Planechase. They're called Phenomenon. Phenomena cards are just sort of like one stops where something happens real quick, and then you continue to planeswalk on to the next plane. So particularly, go ahead.
I found one that's easy to understand here.
Go for it.
Mutual Epiphany. When you encounter Mutual Epiphany, which just means when it comes off the top of the deck, each player draws 4 cards. And then you immediately planeswalk away. It's in the flavor text.
Yep. So all you got to do is flip it. You end up there. Everybody draws 4 cards, and then you flip it and go on to the next plane. Those were added in the second product, I believe. And they add a lot of flavor and interesting things to speed up the game a little bit more, because a lot of them are things like that: draw more cards, or get some creatures, or get some kind of effect. So they help move things forward, which was good because the first Planechase was a little slow, especially since some planes can be very stifling. I believe there's a plane Shiv. And if I'm remembering correctly, Shiv is a pretty like prison-y type plane.
No, this one actually isn't bad. Each creature has fire breathing.
Oh, okay. So that one's
Shiv. But I know what you're talking about. I can't remember either. But
yeah,
there's ones where
a couple of them
everybody gets ghostly prison.
Yeah, everybody has ghostly prison effect where you have to pay mana to attack. There's one where the Great Furnace maybe that makes you sacrifice creatures, and if you don't, discard cards or something like that. Like there's all kinds of wild planes that can just completely shut down something. And we'll talk more on how to avoid that when we talk about tips. But first, we should talk about ways of commanderizing it. Now, I've played a lot of different variants of Planechase, people's homebrews of how to make it work, how to make it not work. They were worried about certain things happening, so they tried to tweak a bunch of different things on it. One of the ones that I've seen for people trying to commanderize it is double everything. And what that means is instead of paying 1 extra for each extra roll you do, you pay 2 extra. So it went from 0, 1, 2, 3 to 0, 2, 4, 6. And that was awful. I'm not calling anybody out. It's not a play on them. I know that they were just trying to make it work the best way that they thought it would. They were worried because since Commander makes more mana, since you usually have generally more ramp things and things, that it would be too easy to move from plane to plane. Let me tell you something. You only have a 1 in 6 chance every time you roll the die to get off the plane in the first place. You do not want to be stuck on a plane for 18 turns or whatever. Don't double it. You don't have to. I promise. Like,
no, and like I could see that maybe in like the olden days where like you had a lot of like stagnant board states. Everybody had like 50 creatures and you weren't going anywhere and there was time. Nowadays, Commander is lickety split. Like you still are playing cards on your own turn all the time. Like you're always short mana. Every turn nowadays, we play things to the point where every mana counts, even in a 4-player game when you're playing a ridiculous junk and it goes to turn 8. Like, you don't have time to be tapping mana for this thing.
Yeah, back when I did that infinite 14 roll game, someone was like, "Do you think you have enough mana?" And I answered them honestly, no, because there's no such thing. There's no such thing as too much mana. Now that mana burn's not a thing, there's no such thing. I will gladly have infinite mana. So yeah, don't worry about doubling everything. That's not a good thing. The other thing I saw was all planes all the time, which was someone had decided that they didn't like that planes didn't move enough. So they took out the rolling mechanic and just said at the end of every turn, flip to a new plane. And it would just be, and that is way too fast. You don't get any time to savor being on a plane, taking advantage of it, getting any sort of idea behind it. It was their heart was in a good place, though. They didn't want to make it where anybody was like super stuck on a thing. But what would happen instead is the RNG of things would hit people, and then suddenly, randomly, one person was on the prison plane when it was their turn, and on their next turn, they're on the sacrifice stuff or discard cards plane or whatever. So they kept hitting bad planes. Meanwhile, one of their opponents is hitting all the planes that benefits +1/+1 counters in a +1/+1 deck. So like it feels bad to not have any control over the situation. So I did not think that was a particularly good way to do it. Now, I think that the major rules of Commander Planechase are likely to not change from the original Planechase model. So same things that we said at the top of the thing are going to apply to Commander Planechase. I think that works great. My own personal iteration that I've also added is if everyone at the table agrees, or enough of the table agrees that being on a particular plane is getting dreary after a couple turns, planeswalk. Like if everybody is spending every mana that they have to get the hell off of the Great Furnace, just do it. Like don't put yourself in a position where you're playing in a situation that everybody is unhappy about, or only one person at the table is happy about because they're the only one with a deck that can deal with being there.
Yeah. And like that's going to come a little bit too, and I don't know if it's going to come up in tips or not, but whatever. Just keep in mind that this is like a ridiculous version of an already fan-created ridiculous format. So like, and I was just thinking in my head about like where to put this right at the very end, and I will probably write it down there and say it again. Do not take this seriously. This is ridiculous. This is one of the most obscure and awful ways to play if you're trying to like score the W. It is so weird, so random, and things turn on their ears all the time. There's legit cards that just say like when you get here or when this pops up, board wipe.
Yeah.
Whatever you had on the go. Nobody played a card. Nobody did a thing. It wasn't a game action. It just happened. And there's nothing you can do about it. There's no way to counter or stifle planar effects. They can't be interacted with. The planar deck exists in the command zone, and there's no way you can get in there. So like, just know when you sit down to Planechase, it's going to be weird. Don't take it too personally. Don't get really invested, and just have fun and go with the flow.
I like that a lot, and I think it's very important. Just remember, I know that we always say it's a game. But this, more than anything, is a game over a game.
Yeah.
It's like you can't get mad if you're playing tag with people and you have added the extra rule of like handcuffing your feet together, like
Right. Or
you,
giving everyone a 10-foot pole and they can just reach around and
exactly.
hit
It's like
right? Like,
you added that extra rule to increase the enjoyment of the game, not decrease it. So just don't worry about winning. That's not what Planechase is about. Just have as much fun with it as you can. But after we're done with randomizer, I will tell you some tips on how to work on making Planechase as fun as we possibly can. So, with
I
that,
do have one other thing here.
oh yeah,
and I
go
think
ahead.
this is the best place to slot it in because it's about like commanderizing it. And something I've seen actually on other people's streams that has come out decently well. It's not over the top, but it's also like can be helpful if you're in that scenario. There is a card that only needs to be played in Planechase, so nobody really knows about it. It's called Fractured Power Stone. And this is a 2-mana rock. Taps for a colorless, and it also taps to roll the planar die. So all the same rules apply. So you can just tap this thing once a turn to roll the planar die. Whilst I don't expect everybody just like have a copy of this laying around in case you got to slot it in. Once, I think it was Emmara actually. Again, shout out to our good friend Emmara. Emmara starts with the rule that you have a copy of Fractured Power Stone in your command zone or companion zone. I don't know, whatever. Same deal though.
I got you.
So like it can be played from the command zone, and then if it gets destroyed, it just goes to your graveyard. So like it's just an extra 101st card that because you're playing Planechase, and again, who's going to run this unless you're building your deck specifically for Planechase? And at that point, congrats, you're going to have 2 when you play with Emmara.
Right.
But it's just one way to like make it so that it's a little bit easier to move. Like we said, you're not going to have a bunch of mana you want to planeswalk, even if the plane sucks. You're going to blow your turn and spend your 8 or 9 mana rolling the thing 3 or 4 times, and then you're going to be like, pass the turn. So this is just one thing I saw that was successful.
I absolutely 100% agree, and I think that's a great way of dealing with sort of like a similar thing what I was saying, where it's like if everybody's miserable, just planeswalk, like just let it go, right?
Yeah, very similar.
But yeah, like I think that's a really good way of handling things. Just like give you guys an out, especially if it's a game where everybody just brought their commander decks, their normal commander decks, and they weren't planning on playing Planechase tonight. It's like, give them a break. Like, nobody's going to be running, like you said, no one's going to be running Fractured Power Stone in their deck. But it is a very good card for Planechase. It came out of the Planechase Precon, so it was there built for Planechase. So have people able to use it. Yeah. Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and take a breather? We'll do our randomizer, and then we'll talk about tips. What's our random card today, Adam?
Our random card today is Slaughter Specialist. Slaughter Specialist is 1 and a black for a 3/3 Vampire Warrior printed in Innistrad Midnight Hunt. And it says, when Slaughter Specialist enters the battlefield, each opponent creates a 1/1 white human creature token. And then whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Slaughter Specialist. I have no idea. Like, I'm looking at this, and I probably wouldn't run it in sealed, and I wouldn't draft it. Why would one want to?
Okay, so here's the thing about Midnight Hunt. So Midnight Hunt was a pretty bomb heavy dependent sealed format and draft format. There are very few very good cards in Midnight Hunt. So if you hit one of those, you are golden. The rares were particularly heavy over the uncommons and commons in the set. So this card, while not super great, right? It's a 3/3 for 2 that gives your opponent a 1/1. But if you're in black in draft, there is a fair good amount of kill in this set. I believe Infernal Offerings in this set. I think there's quite a few really decent kill spells in this meta in black, which means you're also fighting over black all the time when doing these kind of things. But this card versus the werewolf decks was usually pretty decent because they required way too much emphasis on their creatures, and you could just remove a creature, make this stronger, swing with a 4. Eventually, they have to start chump blocking it, and the more they chump block it, the bigger it gets. It was okay. I'm not saying it was great. It definitely was not great. But if I got this out of a pack and I had the sufficient number of removal for 3 or 4 removal, I would probably hop this into a deck just to be a 3/3 on turn 2 and see how quickly I could push out. That being said, there was quite a few 1/4s-ish in Midnight Hunt. A lot of the werewolves have decent toughness on the front and then become powerhouses on the back. So,
a lot of the humans were like that too because they were going for the Coven mechanic in that one.
The Coven mechanic.
So you ended up with a lot of like varying powers of creatures, but like with big butts to make up for the fact that you had like a 1, a 2, and a 3.
Usually what I found myself doing when I was drafting the set heavily is it was like, oh, well, I'm already going into red-black because I got a bigger bomb. We'll go ahead and slide this in. Yeah, it's like, or I'm already going to be in mono-black because of these 3 cards that I was able to draft earlier. Yeah, sure, we can slot this in. Like, it's definitely not a 23rd pick. It's not something that you put last in being able to play. But its ability isn't going to work as much as you would hope, obviously. Like, you're just not going to get there super often. Now, every once in a while, you play an opponent who's just not hitting anything. You swing at them for 9 damage with this thing over the course of 3 turns. And then they start chump blocking it because they're like, I don't want to die from it, you know? So
yeah,
it can, but it's most likely not going to snowball. Don't count on it.
No, and I'm gonna, rather than the commander, I'm gonna go into cube for now because
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the same things as what you're saying about like just the general draft and like sealed formats. I don't see this being very good in like any cube really. If your cube is slower, then that 1/1 is going to matter a lot for your opponent, and you're just going to give them free value.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you did draft every single piece of removal in a cube, you might benefit from this, and this will be like ridiculously large, but your investment overall is going to be too much, and it's way too easy to outpace. Like, I would much rather, what is the other one? Like not Jared. What is his name? The like 2 mana that at like the end of your turn, you get a zombie if something died.
Oh yeah. The one that makes zombies with decayed. Yeah.
Sure. I'm going to look that up later. Yeah, it'll be on the screen because I'm not looking it up right now. But like that guy for 2 mana out of like the same pair of sets. I don't remember which one it was in Estrada Midnight Hunt. Or like
Jadar, Ghoul Caller of Nephalia.
Sure, that guy. Play that guy in your queue because that is going to do a lot more work for whoever drafts it. It's going to fit more archetypes. There is very few archetypes you're going to put into a cube that are going to involve your opponent's creatures dying. It's too hard to control. You have to commit too much of it in your cube to make something like that work. Like, then you're just way top heavy on removal. And if that's your jam, you're still going to have better things to put in there than this. Because now you're going to play all the other things that care about when any creature dies all the time, and maybe removes them more frequently. Like, it's a very different cube. I don't see this fitting in any cube.
And I agree with that. Even if you were trying to build a cube, like you were like, I love vampires, I'm going to build a vampire cube. Like, if you go across the history of Magic, you're going to find so many more vampires that fit the bill before this. Like, Vampire Nighthawk, I will take every time before this. Like,
every time
before this.
Freaking love Vampire Nighthawk.
As far as Commander goes, I mean, again, you're working on a sliding scale of the fact that everything is playable in Commander, right? Depending on your power level, you're going to be able to put this in somewhere. So if this is your pet card, go for it. You know, But I think the fact that the card is worth 27 cents as a rare tells a lot about its playability in Commander. It's
Yeah.
again, you're just going to have better stuff, and like that's okay. Like these kind of cards exist because they're there to give you a little bit of oomph in the set that they're in, right? The discussion of it being in draft or sealed is pretty much the discussion of what this exists in, because even in block constructed, if you're lucky, you have access to way more vampires that give you way better effects than a 3/3 that may get bigger if you're lucky.
The only place in like constructed commander that I can see this being useful in is some sweaty degenerate stuff. I don't actually want to see the deck that this is good in, because I'm seeing the like the Turgrid decks and the what the hell, Toxrill decks, like the Edict decks, like anywhere that like Dictate of Erebos is good, this is good, and I don't want to see it.
Yeah, the original shoulder decks. Yeah, like braids, those kind of things. Exactly. And it's like, you know, you can use this, but even then you're like, there's way better cards for me to put in that slot.
Yeah.
Another Edict spell. But
yeah, right. Or 11 mana. What's they're mostly 3 mana, but I'd still take those instead. Is like the Gaslight thing or the Fleshbag Marauder effect.
Oh yeah.
Like I would just rather play
just
that.
Just like a little Edict creature. Yeah. Yep. I agree. So like it's
the Edict card.
Yeah. But like that's the thing. It's sad to say that you see a rare and you're just like, this rare is not good in any format ever, right? But like at least it was a little bit of padding in a limited format, which is something. But you know, sometimes you gotta have rares like these to fill out a set and make it so that your other rares are worthwhile. You know?
Mark Rosewater said it himself. You got to have bad cards to have good cards, right? How do you have a contrast? How do you know a card's good if every card's good? Then they're all just meh. So don't play this card.
Yeah, and I do have to admit, when I was drafting, I played this card a lot more than I care to admit. I also lost a lot more in Midnight Hunt than I care to admit. Until
we got there.
Yeah, until Crimson Vow came out during the Midnight Hunt era. I was like, oh man, this card seems like it should work, and it didn't. It didn't feel good. It did not feel good. But yeah, I would much rather have Jadar as well.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. Well, then let's talk tips.
Yeah. Let's talk tips. Let's talk about tips.
Okay. So saying that you are actually planning to play Planechase and you know a group of people and you tell them ahead of time, hey, I want to play Planechase. You give them a lowdown of the rules. You say, hey, we're going to meet up. How do you build for Planechase, right? One of the things that I have written down here is that using a regular commander deck for Planechase is probably going to slow things down. And I say that because normally when people build a commander deck, they build around a mechanic or a commander, some kind of theme. And those themes, like those narrow interpretations of what something does, can get really bad if you end up on a plane that stops you completely. You have a bunch of things that involve +1/+1 counters, and you end up on a plane that shuts down adding counters to something. You're playing against someone who's running a bunch of counters, and you end up on the proliferate plane. And suddenly they have a huge advantage over you for 1 or 2 turns, right? Which may be enough to just completely cinch up a game. So if you're building for Planechase, my suggestion is to build a little broader. Give yourself less of that narrow focus and make sure that you have cards in your deck that maybe you wouldn't run if you were playing regular commander, you know? Just thin out the theme and give yourself some general things to work with in case something goes south and you end up on a plane for several turns that may have normally stopped your deck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I agree that if that's what you're going in for, like if your routine is to sit down with people and your preferred way to play is Planechase, this is definitely the way to do it. Like, understand what you're getting into if you want to play the games. Like, my only caveat, it's not even a caveat, I don't even know how it's
you just
like,
you want to say,
tell you,
play Planechase, right? Like, if you have a deck,
like,
play a deck.
Yeah, but like mostly, like, I'm never going to bother, I guess, is where I'm going with that. Like, I recognize that your point is true and valid, and that if you're going to be playing Planechase on the regular, understand what you're getting into, build as though that's your main format. I am just going to throw a deck in and see what happens, because as I said earlier, like, this is just a ridiculous way to play a fan-made format, and I spend all my time brewing regularly. However, you're right. If this is your way, do it right.
Yeah, but I do agree, but you also know, you recognize that you might end up getting slowed down or even stopped by being stuck on a particular plane. So as long as you acknowledge that, you're in the right place. That's what we're really talking about. If you want to build 4 Planechase, broaden it out. If you want to just play whatever you've got and bring it in, that's cool. Just know that you might end up on a plane that only hurts you and no one else will care.
And it's also important to note that, like, that can still happen even if you build it right.
It absolutely can.
Right. There's, like, if you build, like, because you're still going to build it into, like, general archetypes. If you're building it into, like, a Stompy deck, and you're playing Gruul Stompy, and you hit Celestine Reef on the plane of Luvion, and it just says, creatures without flying or island walk can't attack. And you're done. And then you're done. Like, because you still got to play in the colors, you still got to play with a commander, you still have to play with some semblance of a theme.
Exactly.
Right? Like, otherwise, you're just going to play with, like, whatever colors you picked, good stuff. And then just play regular commander at that point.
Yeah. But that does lead me good into my next tip, which is filter your planes to fit the group. Look, you know who you're playing commander with. Most of the time, especially with Planechase, since you've got to get people to agree to it, you're probably going to be playing with people you know. And if you are playing with people you know, you have a general idea of what they like to play and what they don't like to play. So make sure before you start, if you know that there's going to be a plane that's going to cause turmoil in your group, is going to slow things down in a way that your group doesn't like, or speed things up in a way that your group doesn't like, take the plane out of the planer deck. You do not have to play with every single plane. And in fact, I would say that most of the time when you play with every single plane, you are setting yourself up for an eventual disaster of a game. Like, it will eventually happen that if you shuffle up that planer deck enough times, that you are going to hit 5 or 6 planes in a row that are an absolute nightmare for 3/4 of the table. And you do not want to be in that game when that happens. General rule of thumb, if a game of Planechase takes longer than 2 hours, something happened that means that you probably did it wrong. And it's a slower format. It's supposed to be a slower format because of the way that it builds up. But if your normal games are a half hour and you're playing 2-hour Planechase game, then you probably mess something up. So keep that in mind. Filter your decks to fit the group that you're going to play with. And let your group know what kind of planes they're in for, so that they...
Now I need to know. Carry on. Sorry.
No, you're good.
I was just looking up because I have already found this at some point, and I'm going to, like, look at it so I get the name of it right. And then we can shout it out, and I'll put it into, like, some show notes, because it is an app that I found at some point. And again, like, these are some of the hardest cards to track down too, by the way. Like, you can buy these singles, and if you would like the deck, please buy the singles. They do exist. I will say that they're harder to track down, and, like, most LGSs don't carry them. So with that in mind, I did find this little... Skip this, please. No, get maybe later. Planechase MTG Companion. I'm going to do this real quick.
That's perfect. Planechase MTG Companion's a great little app. You get to make your customized planer deck, and then you just hit a button when it's time to Planechase, and it'll automatically do it. My suggestion on that also is make sure that you're using phenomena that fill in there well. I like to use the phenomena that only speed up the game. So that draw 4 cards one that we were talking about earlier, really good one to use because it makes the game go faster.
Oh, that board wipe one can
you can
take off. That
yep,
can take a hike.
Yep. Kick
So
rocks.
and either if you're either building the physical deck with like the singles you pick up at your LGS, or if you find a companion app such as this, or if you print your proxies because you can't find them but you still want the physical deck at your table, which is cool. Whatever you're doing, that's right. Take a look and see which ones you like and which ones you don't, because this is a game and it is a ridiculous format of a fan-made format, and you can do what you want.
Exactly.
Make it fun. Don't do anything that's going to like make everybody at the table hate each other for the next 3 days, and then nobody's going to jump into your Discord and chat. It's just going to be radio silence. Have fun.
And then Adam and I already talked about this pretty much at length, but just to reiterate, install another way to planeswalk. So Emmara uses the Fractured Power Stone in the command zone. I use if people seem to be trying to get off the plane and it's just not working after 2 rounds around the table, just planeswalk, don't worry about it, whatever. I've seen people use you can subtract 1/4 of your life points to planeswalk.
That sounds awful, but I guess if you're in a pinch,
if you're desperate, it's like, yeah, sure, if you're, and like, granted, that does help certain decks more than others. Some people will be like, okay, well then I'm going to play my life gain deck where I have 200 life all the time. Cool. Well, you're subtracting 50 life where someone else only subtracted 10. So we get it, but like, just remember you're trying to make it work out for the whole table. If someone's going to try to game that system, then they were going to do that regardless. So
that's the way I always think about it in like Commander in general. Is like, if you needed the W that bad that you had to cheat, it's all yours, man. I'm just here for drinking beer and eating tapas with my friends.
I love it. And that's pretty much all I had to say on Planechase. Is there anything you want to add to the end of the Planechase?
Not really. Like, it's succinct. It's a ton of fun. Check out some of our friends that do this pretty regularly, very specifically Emmara. Again, I will have all sorts of shout outs to her in our show notes and all that other fun stuff, links to her Twitch and stuff. I'm actually, as the date of recording, I'm actually on her stream tomorrow.
Yeah. So
playing Planechase.
So
right? I don't even, this is the 4th time I'll ever have played Planechase, and I don't care, because I'm going to go and I'm going to have a ridiculous time with my friends playing a ridiculous format of a fan-made format and eating tapas and drinking beer with my friends.
Yeah. And I figure since we have just a couple more minutes to fill out, I had an idea for closing out the show that I haven't actually discussed with Adam yet. So if you don't hear this part,
shocked,
it's because we decided to cut it out.
We'll see.
So, Adam, I wanted to bring to you a question that was asked on Twitter for us to discuss in terms of the way that we all play the formats that we love. So this question I saw coming from Check Your Bulk, which I thought was a really cool
did I answer this on
cool
Check
little
Your
group.
Bulk's Twitter?
You might have. I know I did. But I do want to talk a little bit about it. And the question was, a player at your table threatens to concede if a certain game action is taken. They're not clear on what game action, but if this game action is taken, they threaten to scoop and walk away. What do you do? How do you handle that situation? Do you let them scoop?
Okay, so I did, in fact, I think, answer this on the Twitter, but I also thought about it personally, and I do have an answer because I feel strongly on the subject. It's come up before. And I actually understood the question a little differently, and I does not change my answer at all.
Okay.
So I understood the question to be that like this specific game action was in fact defined, and this player, if I take this action, will concede in response. And my answer in all cases is ignore what they said, do the thing, play the game, and pretend like they didn't, because that's the fair thing to the rest of the table. Whether it's and I would tell anybody doing this, at any table, like if you're player 1 and player 2 goes to attack player 3 and player 3 in response concedes to the attack, because usually what they do, and this came up very specifically when, oh shite, what card was it that came out and it was like the ninja guy that like,
yeah, we were talking about,
but it's a bunch of them, right? Like, so it's that, it's like the sword of annihilation or whatever it is, like that equipment, like all these, like you lose if you take damage or whatever have you, or like the
Vorpal sword does
stadium. Yeah, Vorpal sword. So like a lot of these started coming out where like it was in response to a game action that player could lose, and a lot of people are like, well, I'm just going to scoop before it happens. And my response again is ignore them.
Yeah,
they were there. If they want to get up and leave the table, then they get up and leave the table. You can't control them and force them to stay in the seat. But what you can do is play the game the way the game was going to go before somebody got salty about losing in a way that they didn't want to lose and got up and left. It's the fair way to the rest of the table. It's the only way to like be fair to whomever it was that was taking that action. Because if they knew that the person was going to concede, and it's not necessarily a rule, and I think we maybe slightly touched on it, or I touched on it with somebody, but they said like the sorcery scooping rule has to be that was you.
Yeah.
The sorcery scooping rule. So like I think your opinion, you were clear, is that like you wanted like a clear and concise rule of when you could scoop. And I know that also like Dan Sheehan with Commander Sphere has a whole video on scoop, and I'm not opposed to scooping. I'm just saying that like I'm going to ignore you if you scoop mid my turn.
Yeah.
And I'm going to play it out the way it was, and I'm going to get all my effects that I would have gotten for dealing the damage. And you can, if you decide to scoop before blocks, all my stuff got through, that's fine. I don't lose any of it. If you decided to play it the way that most of us would, and we make it appropriate blocks, then I would have lost creatures. Cool. But I just ignore them. That's my stance. If they were that salty, they didn't need to be at my table anyway.
I think that's 100% right. I agree with all of that. To continue on that, the thing that I had said was that while I think that this is the exact way to do it, I wanted to find a way to like word it in a rulings way so that it could be used by other people, because the current rulings rule is just sort of like, if they quit, they quit, tough titties, and it's not great. It's not good. And well, like we know as players that those rules don't really matter. What matters is the overall vibe of the thing. So if someone is playing Ramses Assassin Lord, I found the card. The 4/4 Death Touch blue-black commander that gives your other assassins +1/+1, and whenever a player loses the game, if they were attacked this turn by an assassin you controlled, you win the game.
No.
That card requires you to connect with an assassin, and if your opponent is like, well, I'll just concede and then you can't win the game, you just ignore that and you won the game. And that's, if I weren't the one playing Rams, if someone else was playing Ramses at my table, that's exactly what I'd tell them to do. I'd be 100%. Like, congratulations, you won the game.
I would turn and shake that player's hand that got connected with Ramses, and the one who decided to scoop, I would just like seat at a different table from them.
Yeah, just do your best to sit away.
That's a salty play, and this person did the thing that their deck was there to do, and congrats to them.
Now, what I ended up saying for the event itself, the person was just like, would you talk to them? Would you do whatever? I said it depends entirely for me whether this is a private event or a public event. If I'm at a house, if I'm at somebody's house that I play Commander with frequently, and somebody does this, we're going to just do exactly what we always do. Ignore it, keep playing, whatever happened, go. But if we're at a private event at home, I might talk to that person afterwards, and it's like, hey man, I understand you didn't want to stick around for the beatdown of that, but you can't hold the table hostage, and it's a real dick move to like try to manipulate people into not attacking you by saying that you'll pick up your toys and go home. Like,
Well, and this is the difference between a trusted play group and an untrusted play group that
Exactly.
we've heard at length, right? Like if you have the social clout to look at your friend who just did like a dirty play and be like, that was dirty,
Yeah.
and I'm not appreciative of it.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're out at an untrusted play group and somebody that happens, like all you can really do is just walk away and find another group.
Yeah.
And there's gonna be other groups, right? Like nobody says, as they always say, you don't have to play with them. And that person didn't have to play with you. They got to scoop.
Exactly.
I don't care. I'm not like, if you got to scoop because you're not having a good time, go find a table that you
gotta go.
at.
You gotta go. Don't threaten the table, but if you gotta go, you gotta go. I get that. No problems. If they were on my stream and they did this, like if it was a guest that got invited on that I didn't know as well, or someone new to the thing, and this happened, I would be much more upset about it. You wouldn't see it on my face during stream. I would just be like, you gotta go, you gotta go. But there would be problems later. Because
and we would probably handle it the same as we've already said. Like we would just be like, oh, they had to go. I'm sorry that you weren't able to stick around, but that attack went through and you win. Congrats. You
exactly.
on my stream.
Same actions, but I would definitely have a different feeling about it. So when they ask, like, how would you handle it? How would you feel? I'm like, if it's private, I'm just like, whatever, go ahead, go do your thing, move on. I will say the same thing if we're recording. Please don't do that to me while we're recording if you can help it. I understand that there's things going on in your life. I've got a show to run. Please don't do that to me if you can avoid it. Like, if you've still got no other choice, cut out. I get it. It's okay, but, like, I'll remember, so...
and that said, too, like, I think it's more about the malicious scoop that they were referring to. Like, if your baby's in the background losing their crap, you gotta go pick up this baby and put a bottle in its mouth, then bye.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, I'm not going to hold that against you.
Absolutely, this was about the malicious scoop, right? And I said it was an undefined action, but the action was clearly supposed to be malicious compliance. Yeah, it's like if you are going to put me to 0 and gain 100 life for it, I'm going to scoop so that you can't. Or if you're going to hit me and it's going to cause Ramses to make you win, I'm going to concede so that you can't, or whatever. If you're going to kill 2 of my creatures and 1 of their creatures with a spell that kills exactly 3 creatures, I'm going to scoop so that spell fizzles.
And malicious malicious scooping doesn't fly for me.
Yeah, any issues of malicious scooping in our house, we just go, you can go if you want to go. We're just going to treat it as if it happened. Because we're not bothered. We're not bothered.
I didn't really want you here anyway.
Yeah.
It's like really, not to be like rude about it. Maybe it's like, your brother or your best friend or something like that that's playing with you. But like, honestly, it's almost like that's more like, I don't want you here. I don't want to hang out with my friend when my friend is having a bad time. And
if you're not feeling good, go home. Catch up next week. It's all good. Or don't. If you're going to keep acting like that, like...
I got a fresh new 0 on my age next year. I don't have time to be playing around with, like, people who don't want to hang out with me.
Right?
Man, life's too short. I'm dying.
I know, right? So...
Anyway, now you got me all worked up.
Well, I'm glad that this worked out exactly as planned. So, tune in for more fresh takes like that in the future, or maybe not, depending on what we decide to do.
I'll leave that in. People want to know. You can't, maybe I'll put it in the thing. Hey, stick around for, like, it's not even a hot take. It's like the accurate take. I dare someone to fight us. Like, really. And I think that's actually what the majority of, like, the Twitter responses were to that.
Yeah, most of them are like, if they want to scoop, let them move on. But like, I just wanted to add in there for those people out there who are thinking even vaguely about like, I'd like to be a guest on other people's streams. I would like to be like in the community and be a part of this big Commander thing. I love you, and I'm so glad that you want to join us. If you're going to join us, please join us for the whole game if you can. Please. And please don't threaten people while you're on stream. I'm going to talk about one more quick thing before we go, because this really annoyed me. It was really on my high list of things. So there is an episode of a particular Commander show. I'm not going to talk about it. I love that show, but I'm not going to just shout it out at this point because I'm talking about a particularly bad episode where a very, very famous person was on and playing very high level Commander. Everyone at the table was playing CDH, essentially. Like, they brought CDH stuff. This guy starts comboing out on turn 0. He's like, I'm playing this, I'm playing this, I'm doing this, I'm dropping this, I'm playing the 6-cost commander on turn 0. And someone was like, wait, Force of Will? And the guy had used the Lion's Eye Diamond to ditch his whole hand. He'd done all kinds of stuff. And the guy just slides his deck off to the side and sits there with his arms crossed for the entirety of the video. He got dunked on because he was trying to pop off on turn 0 and got Force of Willed, and then scooped and sat there looking bad mood for an hour-long episode of a YouTube video. That is the worst thing. He could have stepped away from the table and it would have been better.
Yeah. And like, at that point, I would have actually just cut and restarted.
I would have just cut and restarted. Or I would have been like, hey man, go get a drink.
As the director or producer or host or whatever you want to call it, I'll be like, that's bad content.
Yeah.
Let's try this again.
Exactly.
Like, that just didn't occur.
Exactly.
And I think that's maybe the thing to keep in mind, as Matt said, if you're looking to get into like joining people's streams, because there's a ton of them these days. You can always, one of your friends is, if you're in the Magic Twitter sphere, one of your friends streams, and if you want to jump in on that, just remember it's content. And if it's not going to be good content, they aren't going to want to invite you back, and you're not going to have a good time. Like, we're all here to have fun. I started tuning down my decks because content.
Yeah. It just makes it more fun to watch. It makes it more fun to engage with when it's not at the highest level or whatever. So, like, forget the W. It's not that important. It's not that critical to what you're doing right now, which is trying to entertain other people and have a good time yourself.
And drink beer and eat tapas with my friends.
Yes!
Gang, it's been a fabulous time. Thank you for coming to hang out with us this week. Hopefully I feel better. This should be on time. But we'll catch you next time on Unlimited Commander. Have a great night.
Bye.
If you liked what we had to say, consider supporting us on Patreon. Your support goes directly to growing and improving the show.
You can also like, follow, and subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Make sure to comment or leave a review. The cast can also be found on Twitter at Unlimited Commander.
You can find Matt's Twitch, Twitter, and other YouTube projects at knowledgepoolmtg.com.
And Adam can be found on Twitch and Twitter at Adamus_Prime86.
Our theme song is Polaroid by Harris Heller, licensed by Creative Commons.